Welcome again to our June Business of All Protein seminar. This is our second one in June, which is rare. We've been doing a three-part series for those that have not joined the first two. Our first two parts with Brian were the past 2 weeks. Part one was on how to edit your story. Part two was on how to visualize your story. And today's focus is on how to deliver your story. Before I introduce Brian, again, for those that have not joined, and I apologize if you have joined, my intro spiel here is going to be a bit redundant. But my name is Pat McCauley. I'm the Startup Innovation Lead here at the Good Food Institute. I serve as the main point of contact for startups and entrepreneurs. So if you are an alternative protein founder or startup interested in the resources that GFI offers, please do reach out. A few housekeeping items. For those that are new to the Good Food Institute, we are an international nonprofit organization that is focused on developing the roadmap for a sustainable, secure, and just protein supply. We identify the most effective solutions, mobilize resources and talent, empower partners across the food system to make alternative proteins accessible, affordable, and delicious. We envision a world where alternative proteins are no longer alternative. And second thing, before I introduce Brian, this is recorded. If you registered and you're here today, you'll get a follow-up email with the recording. We also post all of these on our YouTube channel. So if you miss part 1 and 2, you can view them there. And lastly, Brian usually has been presenting for about 20 minutes or so. So we leave the entire second half for Q&A. We very much encourage you to ask questions, even specific questions to your particular presentation or speaking engagements you have coming up and things like that. Brian is a real expert and we're lucky to have him. So please do ask. We ask that you put it in the Q&A box versus the chat just so we can get to them. And with that, it's my pleasure to once again introduce Brian Cooley. Brian has been a GFI mentor with us since we started the program. We've been extremely lucky to have him. He is, again, giving us an hour of his time very graciously here to present to the broader GFI audience. For people that have not joined, Brian has over 30 years of experience as a senior technology editor, media host, speaker. He's trained many senior corporate executives, postdoc medical researchers, and GFI startups at the art of being heard, believed, and remembered. Brian, welcome back. Thank you again, and I will hand it over to you.
Thanks, Pat, and thanks everyone for thanks for the whole GFI team for putting this series together. It's really been well done. I want to just acknowledge GFI does great programs and webinars and sessions. They really stand out. So I appreciate the work you guys do. And I hope everyone in the audience notices that as well. Today, as we finish our third of 3, as Pat mentioned, we're going to be talking about how to perform your presentation. Just as a recap, in case you're joining us just now, our first episode, if you will, was about shaping your story to make sure it's very sharp, concise, using smart brevity, a book I'm a big fan of, and that it really keeps moving forward, and most importantly, that it is designed with the audience's interest in mind. Then the second chapter, we talked about how to build visuals, because most presentations today, you're expected to bring visuals, of course. We talked about how to make those visuals compelling and to focus them on telling what words alone can't fully convey, as opposed to using visuals to replicate every single thing you're talking about, which ends up being kind of bulky and leaden. So that was our last chapter. And in this one, we're going to tie it all together and talk about how you're going to take the first 2 sets of trainings and put it together and deliver it, how to present. A lot of this will be about how you use your voice. And we had some questions last time about, is my voice good enough? I don't think I have a great voice, those kind of questions. Those aren't questions that are relevant anymore. There was a time when we had this sort of cliche of an announcer voice or a presenter voice, and that really has been gone for a couple decades or more now. As a society of audience, we now think of any voice as being good because voices are all interesting. And to use your voice makes more sense because it's coming from your personality as opposed to trying to affect a voice that maybe you've heard in, some media or some platform over the years. So break out of that habit of thinking you need to sound a certain way. I just want you to sound your best self. And a couple other things that you're going to notice that are different this session. I'm not coming to you from a kind of a elaborate studio. This is just me on a typical, fairly typical webcam in my office because we're going to talk about real world setups today. So I want it to be in a very normal, accessible setup. And I'm going to show you some recommendations for the equipment that is affordable but gives you a really good look and sound, a cut above the average. We'll talk about that to give you a simple shopping list if you're interested. And we're also going to look at a couple of videos today because a couple of you asked last time, a few of you asked, can we see some samples of presentations that are done well? And that is going to come a little later as well. I've got a few clips for you. So let me get a few slides up for you. I don't have a ton of slides on this area because I want to really kick this around and talk about it. But if I bring you into the topic here, I would say that we want to start with varying your voice. This is really important, and not getting into a monotone. It's very easy to forget to vary your voice because when you get on stage and you get kind of tight, you just sort of lock into this very even discussion voice. And you also tend to talk too much, which we talked about in earlier episodes. When you're done with your thought, stop talking. But vary your voice. And I put this into two simple concepts to remember. And this is one, vary the amplitude. And we're going to see some examples of this in our sample videos. A simple rule of thumb here is when something is particularly important, put it in bold. And the way you put something in bold in your voice is to simply make your voice a little louder. Not shouting, but just to bring a little more emphasis to it, like I just did there, not having to get dramatic and theatrical. And when you're talking about something that's a little more routine, maybe just the words that connect important words, like if I'm going to move on to my next point, I lower my voice a little bit. It's not dramatic, as you could hear. So sort of the baggage words, you just sort of let those be a little softer, and the important words, you make them a little louder, or the important phrases, you make a little louder. This is very easy to do without having to feel self-conscious. And think of it as putting your voice in bold, or maybe you want to think of it as putting your voice in italics by varying the volume. The other one, there's just two techniques here, amplitude and frequency. Frequency is not the high pitch or low pitch of your voice, but in this case, I mean the rate of words. So sometimes you may want to speak a little faster, and other times you may want to slow down. You speak a little faster to maybe get through words that are part of a list or are not quite as important. Kind of like lowering your voice a little. You might want to scoot through the words that are lower value because those are just kind of connective tissue. And then slow down a little when you're making a really important point. These two techniques, gaining up your volume a little and changing your rate of speech a little, if you couple them just right, you end up holding people's attention far more than if you have a straight monotone level of voice that is the same rate all the time and the same volume and never stops, and also has the other bad habit of you saying too many words because you're nervous and you just keep talking to fill all the silence in the room because you're terrified of silence because that's going to make you feel like you don't know what you're talking about. Obviously, we don't want to do that. So these are real simple techniques. I hope you can just, maybe screenshot that and just keep that handy. And next time you're about to go do a talk, just pull that thing up and say, right, go a little louder for important areas and go a little slower for important areas, and just do the converse for areas that are maybe the connective tissue. Let's talk about silence. Here is a recording waveform of someone's voice, and I'm zooming in on the part where they stopped talking. It doesn't matter what was being said here. I want to just visually emphasize that instead of saying or other crutches, learn the habit of just stopping. It'll seem to you like forever if you stop talking during a presentation and you have a 3/4 of a second stop. You're going to think, good grief, the room is silent and it's just staring at me like, what happened? Do they know where they're going next? Did he or she forget their train of thought? No one's thinking that. When you have a short silence of a half a second, 3/4, a second, these are big gaps, but they don't sound like you don't know what you're doing. They sound like genius. I promise you this. They sound like you are in complete mastery of your talk. So take advantage of silences. And when do you go silent? When you naturally want to. When you finish a thought, stop. Let the room absorb it. Give it a second, second and a half, and then continue on. This is really easy to do once you try it just a few times. It's a super easy technique to get down, and you will have such gravitas in the room by mastering silence, coupled with the amplitude and the frequency of speech that we talked about earlier. These three things together, wow, you will be just completely different the next time you give a presentation without seeming theatrical and without having to have something in your mind that you're always thinking about. This becomes muscle memory very quickly. So please put those three techniques together in your mind: amplitude, frequency, and when there's a natural silence, let it happen. This is Ann Utterback. She's the dean of all of the great sort of television anchors and a lot of actors and a lot of people who speak for a living at a high level. She is all about breathing. That's her specialty. She's known as the breath coach for people who talk for a living at a very high level. And she points out a very interesting sort of mechanical tradition we have. We tend to be taught to breathe. These aren't her words, but they're my words. Upper clavicle breathing. You know, you're taught to stand up, straighten up your back, push your shoulders back. This is great posture, right? And take a deep breath kind of into your chest. So you sort of, straighten your chest and your back out even more. And that's good looking breathing, but it tends to make you tight and it tends to give you a smaller tank of air because you can't take that much additional air into your rib cage. It's constrained by your rib cage. Instead, she says, try a kind of breathing where you would get away from this idea of sucking in your stomach and sticking out your chest and all that. And instead, do what's in green here, abdominal breathing, which is take a deep breath into your belly. Try it right now. You're all sitting there. You can do it now. Try a chest breath. Breathe deep into your lungs and rib cage. I just did one there. Now try doing a deep breath, and you can fill your lungs and rib cage. Obviously, you have to, but also fill your diaphragm. Let your belly take in a bunch of air, if you will. Notice it's a significantly greater amount of air, which allows you to have more voice control because you have plenty of gas in the tank. You're not going to run out of air very often or very likely, and you have plenty of times to take in more air because I just taught you to take gaps, right? Take silences. Another interesting aspect of abdominal breathing, like Ann talks about, is that if you do it a few times, and not too fast, just normal pace, notice how it calms you down. It's going to bring, I guess it's endorphins or something. I don't know what the chemistry is going on there, but it works for me. And if you do it now, see if it works for you. Just nice gradual abdominal breaths, not super fast, just normal rate, but take in a nice belly breath. And it just calms you down. It sends something into your bloodstream, I think. I'm sure many of you in the biological sciences could tell me what's going on, but it works is all that matters. This is a great way to calm yourself if you have any butterflies or nerves before you speak. And if you don't, something's wrong with you. Everybody has butterflies and nerves before they speak. And so this kind of breathing is a wonderful way to bring that down. And also throughout your talk, it gives you the kind of power you need, the kind of breath power you need to do the speaking techniques that I taught you a few slides ago. So do what Ann does, breathe properly. And I remember she came to my grad school when I was in journalism school many moons ago, and she taught us this. And one of the things she taught us that you can use in Zoom meetings, this isn't in the slide, but I just remembered it, is plant your feet directly straight down. So your lower legs are going straight down to the floor and your heels are planted, as opposed to crossing your legs under your chair or sticking them out in front of you. She says it really helps to plant your legs just perpendicular, straight down. Your thighs go straight out and your lower leg goes straight down and your heels and feet are planted during your Zoom talk. It's part of her mechanics that also go with sort of centering and solidly basing yourself, kind of like with the breath, and also making sure your mechanics are well grounded. So I'm giving you a bonus tip there that I just remembered from many years ago. When people tell you should project, I'm sure some of you may have been told, your voice is a little soft. Maybe you could project more. A lot of people get this, and it's not because they have a soft voice. Sometimes they do. And sometimes it's because they have nerves that make what's otherwise a big voice get constrained and get swallowed, as we say. When I say project, I don't want you to think about being loud. Don't think about the theatrical version of projecting, but think about this. It's not like shouting. What it is it's letting the fact that you're compelled by what you're talking about show or come through. So think of it that way, and I think you'll find that projecting doesn't feel so weird, doesn't feel so shouty. If you say, oh, okay, projecting means I want to make sure that my excitement about the topic isn't bottled up. Let it come out, and your voice will naturally have more energy. It just goes hand in hand without you having to think about any volume tricks like, okay, am I heard by the last person in the last row? That's one trick people will give you. Be loud enough so that the furthest person in the room can hear you. That's not a bad rule of thumb, but it's not as good as this. If you follow this rule of thumb, I promise you, everyone in the room is going to hear you, and in the same process, they're going to feel your energy without you being, frenetic or kind of crazy. So let's now get to rehearsal. You've got some of these verbal techniques. We've done our writing or our notes. We talked about that in episode 1. You pulled your visuals together. And people ask me a lot about how should I rehearse my talk? Should I get in front of someone I know? Should I get in front of a group of people so it's more like a group? I don't think you need to get in front of people to rehearse. If you can and you like that, go right ahead. Nothing wrong with it. But nowadays, stick your phone on a stand or, against a book or whatever you can do. It's not fancy. And do whatever you got to do. This guy's using a whiteboard. I would say get in front of a monitor because we're teaching electronic communication here, but whatever works. And here's the way to look at rehearsal. You're trying to get loose, not tight. This is often misunderstood. People will think rehearsal is about getting toward perfect replication so that if I do it and do it and do it, when I get on stage, I'm going to do it exactly right again. I think you're setting yourself up for some failure then. Instead, you should try to get it so it's so ingrained in you. The story is so familiar. We talked about a worn, comfortable old jacket in one of our early talks. That's kind of the idea. You want to create muscle memory so that you can get into your talk, and it doesn't have to be exact, but you're going to be 90% the same as what you rehearsed. And that's great because that 10% variance is the natural energy. And the 90% is making sure that you have got all the right information in all the right order. But by rehearsal, you won't have to worry about what's the next bullet as much. You'll just remember, oh yeah, I go here and I go here to here. Another thing that happens in rehearsal, it's very interesting, is you will, because you're doing it out loud, you will discover phrasings that you will not come up with, I promise, if you just write out a script or bullets or do slides. That gets you only so far. Verbalizing and hearing yourself verbalize, you'll come across ways to connect words or say things. You may come across an interesting catchphrase that I think only happens when you speak. So please do out loud rehearsals. They can seem a little weird, if someone's listening. So do them at home in an off hour on a Saturday when everyone else is out, whatever's working for you. And you're also trying to discover unknown connections between ideas. You will find that as you're doing a live rehearsal for yourself in front of your camera, you're going to make connections. You're going to say, and this is like this, or this is related to something else I spoke about that you didn't think about while you were using notes or making slides. I've done it a few times just while I've been talking to you during this presentation, even hearing myself live. So there's something very special about doing live rehearsal, just as there's something special about presentation. Take the recording from your phone that you see this gentleman doing here and do the hardest thing you'll ever do. Look at it. Most of us hate looking at or listening to ourselves. We don't like to watch our videos. We don't like to listen to ourselves talk. I think it's just a natural thing. Push through and do it because the greatest work and the greatest improvement you'll make is during the awkward times. Just like our mistakes really are the main way we improve. Our awkward review of ourselves is the main way you're going to improve, and really quickly without making it really a lot of work. Just watching a video of yourself, even one time, and actually watching it instead of closing your eyes will move you forward radically. It really helps me. I don't like it, but it really helps me. So this whole thing here is about just one last thing about rehearsal. As I mentioned at the top, I'll mention it again. Do not get into the fear of replication failure. The idea that, oh, I'm on stage and I'm not doing it exactly as I rehearsed it. Do not worry about that. If you naturally get a little loose, you zig and zag a little, that's you being you. I want that. I don't want you to say, I'm going to be letter perfect. If I did that, I would just want a video of you. I would just be a TED organizer and say, hey, don't bother coming to our conference. Just record something and send me a video. Or do you already have one? Just send it. We'll play that for our audience. Nobody wants that. They want you being you, kind of like the value of a whiteboard. We want to see how you work and how you think. This is sort of analogous to that. We want to see you be a little loose, zig and zag on the stage, and not be exact letter perfect to your rehearsal. And most people are never going to know how you rehearsed anyway. So they're not going to know if you vary a little bit from what you rehearsed. No one's ever going to know that. This is the goofiest slide I'll ever show you, but I do have to say I really believe in it. the whole point of all of the presentation training, the performance stuff that we're talking about today, is largely to get you back to just being you. I tell people all the time, I use the lunchtime or the coffee break test. If I go to lunch with you, I think I mentioned this last time, and I ask you, how's your sandwich? Great. Tell me about your work. What are you doing right now? You'll give me a great few minutes about your work. You'll sound great. You'll talk about the stuff that's exciting and why you're excited about it. You'll be catering to me because you don't want to bore a friend, you know. It's like you want to keep them interested. You'll do pretty much everything we talked about here sort of naturally. And yet, when I put you on stage or in front of a podcast mic or in front of a camera for a news reporter, boy, you become someone else. So remember that all you're trying to do is be yourself with a little bit of professional polishing, which we've been sharing during these episodes. But the core is you. I'm just working around the edges to try and get you to be a little more polished, but be yourself. It's a hard journey, but you're already there because that's who you are. You were born that way. And this is all because people connect to people. They don't connect to information. I don't care how cleverly you've written or what amazing factoids you've got. They probably are not what's compelling your audience. In some cases, it's the case. Like if you are breaking massive new news, yeah, your news is holding the audience. But as soon as they hear that, they're going back to attaching to you. And in this day and age, your audience has probably heard whatever you're saying from someone else already. We are so awash in media and communications. Whatever you're telling is probably generally been told to that audience in some way before. Not always, but frequently. So don't feel like, oh, I'm going to tell them something they've never heard and the information is going to win the day. You have to win the day as well by being just a genuine person that they like to listen to. Noticed, believed, remembered. And when you are that great communicator that you're just going to become with these tips, people will make room for your story. Even if they've heard a version of it from others, they will hang on to it. This is the remembered part that we talk about in our framework because they connected with the person. It's not unlike what a lot of nonprofit development people know, which is $100 donors connect to causes. 4 and 5 figure donors connect to people. Yes, they're giving to a cause, but they're giving to a cause because they've met the people behind the cause and they really believe in them, where the cause alone may not shake that much loose. So this is kind of related to that development truism. I want to stop here for a moment and unshare. I got a couple more slides, but they're on a different bent. They're kind of on technical things. So if you have technical questions about web setups for Zoom, we're going to get to that in a moment. I want to stop here, though, and take any questions, if we can, about how to use your voice, how to talk and communicate. That's really what this is all about. So, Pat, why don't we go ahead and take questions on that, and then we'll go back in for a couple more slides after some questions and talk about some practical Zoom setup tips.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. Yes. Please put any questions in the Q&A box. I'll start us off here, Brian, because you mentioned TED, and I'm curious how the delivery changes when you have a format like TED where you have 18 minutes or whatever it is to be remembered, and you know the vast majority of people are going to be watching a recording versus the in-person. How does your delivery change in light of that, of knowing that?
I wouldn't change my delivery because it's being recorded. There's no correlation there. But there is, I like TED Talks, TEDs and TEDx's, because they are short. We talked about in one of our earlier episodes that there's this tyranny of the 1 hour presentation, and many conferences that you'll be invited to speak at will say, hey, we got a half an hour or a 45-minute or a 1 hour slot. Can you give us your talk? And you say, great, I'll have all the time I need. As opposed to, you should say, I don't have 60 minutes, even with 10 minutes of Q&A. I've got 8 minutes, 12, 15, 18. To me, you're starting to push it. I think by 17 or 18, you're starting to get to the point where people naturally fidget. I've heard this repeatedly, that around 17 to 20 minutes, people start to really fidget a lot. And they want to change gears in some way. So holding people beyond 20 minutes to me is a challenge without a big gear change, like moving to Q&A. That's a big gear change. But I don't love presentations that go after 20 minutes, even though I do a lot of them. But I have to have a relentless pace when I'm doing a 1 hour presentation. I just did one yesterday on the trends in technology. And I do a lot of these. And boy, I'm just always thinking, this is a long presentation. I need to keep things moving. And I really have a snappy pace on that one. But if you're being asked to a relatively short presentation, be thankful. Don't feel cheated. You've been given a gift.
Awesome. Thank you. We have a couple questions coming in here. How about asking questions to the audience to get their attention? Do you do that? If so, how often do you do that?
I do that pretty rarely, and I do it in a way that is almost a rhetorical question and not an actual question. Show of hands and things like that can be a little tricky. First of all, when you go to a room live, you never know what the chemistry is. You may be speaking to a group that's coming to a conference, or you may be speaking to a group at a company that says, hey, you're an expert in this. We'd love to have you come do a lunch and learn for our team. And it may be a big firm, and they're bringing 300 people, and they're all there to hear you. You never know the chemistry in either of those rooms, and sometimes people are just reticent to expose themselves in front of people that they don't know or trust, even if they work together. So asking them to raise their hand and reveal something about themselves, like, hey, how many of you have smart home tech in your house? Okay. And how many of you find it too complicated to set up? You're asking people to expose something about themselves they may not want to. And also, they may have to think about it. And while you're waiting for the pregnant pause for them to think, well, let me think now. Do I find that difficult or not? You have this long lull. Or you may get no responses to either side. Now it looks awkward. So how many of you do A or how many of you do B? And no one raised their hand. Now it looks like no one's engaged with your talk. So I kind of don't like the whole trap of give me a show of hands. I will instead do a rhetorical, just think to yourselves, and this works great for Zoom when you can't always see the audience. How many of you have had a problem with this? Or are you the kind of person who's had a problem with this? You're not asking for a show of hands or anything performative, but you are engaging them in a personal one-on-one way, a little bit. So that's how I kind of take those questions to the audience. Being asked questions is a whole different thing, of course.
Awesome. Thank you. Next one here. In the case of a Zoom talk, so not stage talks or in-person talks, what about using a natural outdoor setting instead of a room setting or like studio setting like I have here?
Outdoor sometimes works less often than indoor, although indoor frequently is broken too. We're going to talk about the quick tips on setting up wherever you are, indoor or outdoor. I always think indoor because of audio. I think I mentioned last time I'm more focused on sound than on vision. Someone asked last time, how good of a webcam do you need to get a really good Zoom camera image? And I don't sweat the camera as much as I sweat the mic. If you have to choose one or the other, if I have to turn the quality up or down on audio or video, I would much more happily turn down the video quality and have good audio, and I will hold the audience better than if the video is really good, but the audio comes down in fidelity. That's really very clear to me. So I would say work more on sound, and that argues against outdoors because you have so much potential atmospheric noise and wind noise. So, various things going on like cars, animals hooting and barking and all that, and of course, wind blowing across your microphone. So I'm not big on the outdoor setting, even though it has ample light, which is one of the big challenges in getting a good look. But we'll talk about that in a minute.
Maybe one more here, and then we'll let you jump back in.
Good idea.
With public speaking, do you have any advice for what you do with your hands?
Yeah, this is a good one. People ask this all the time. What should I do with my hands? And should I stand still or should I walk? These are the two sort of physical factors that come in all the time that are not part of voice. So with hands, I would recommend that you be aware of them in rehearsal. That's the best thing you can do when you've got that camera recording yourself. Notice what you do. It may not be the same as what you do on stage. I'll admit that, because it's a different kind of nervous energy. But this is where you have to watch your own recordings at least the first few times and say, oh, look at that. I do too much of the same hand movement over and over. So try to avoid repetitive hand movements, which are not really emphases for what you're talking about. They're just crutches. You've got a bunch of energy and you end up doing this all the time. And that isn't contextual to what you're saying. It's just a habit. So try to break any weird energy habits and move your hands when it makes sense with the content. This is going to depend on you. Some people speak with their hands, some people don't. But you want to make sure you're not getting into a weird energy release that is almost like a tick. So that's all you're looking for on the hands. Otherwise, just be you. The second thing is on walking. I think it's good to prowl the stage as stage directors say. But again, by watching your rehearsal, you'll know if you're walking in a way that's becoming a habitual pattern, kind of like the hands. If you go back and forth at the same speed all the time without variation, that gets a little monotonous. Instead, try and break that by watching your recordings and say, okay, I got to cool it a little bit. Let's do the deep breathing. Every time I take a pause in my talk, like Cooley taught me, that's a time for a belly breath. Okay. And while I'm doing that, just stand still. Then walk a little bit. Another way to handle walking is to address a question we had last time, which is, do you make eye contact with your audience? It'll help you make eye contact with different parts of your audience if you work different parts of the stage. But again, just watch your videos and make sure it's not becoming a frenetic, habitual loop. That's when it becomes weird and distracting to the audience, and they say, this guy just won't stop going, yeah, 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 yeah. And then it just distracts from your talk. So let me get back into, I want to go and look at two videos, not full videos, just snippets, because we had questions last time of, can you show us a couple of videos that do good presentation? And I want to show you two short pieces. And then I want to get into the technology of good online meetings, which will address some of what we talked about a minute ago with indoor versus outdoor and all that. So let me get back into let's see, I'm going to go to my YouTube here, and this should have audio shareable. I think so. And yeah, good. So you see my YouTube screen here, and here is Liz Specht, a longtime member of the GFI team from the early days. Let me just go to theater mode. Well, I'll go to full screen and risk it, see if I lose my... Okay, so I'm just going to give you a little piece of this talk that Liz gave. I saw this many times. As you can see, it's called Clean Meat 101, back when the whole idea of cultivated meat was really new. So she was explaining a lot of things. This is not about necessarily the moment where she is in her content, but I just think it's a good example of how she's naturally being herself, because I know Liz and I know what she's really like, and she's really being herself here, and making a good, clear discussion of her topic. Let's take a look.
So just to give you a sense of the growth, this may not be news to most folks here, but when we were looking at this landscape at just the end of 2016, so less than 2 years ago, there were arguably about 4 companies that we were aware of in this space. As of where we're at now, so again, less than 2 years forward, this is not even an exhaustive list of all of the new startup companies that have emerged tackling this problem, and each in slightly different ways. And I think that's what's particularly exciting to me, is that we're starting to see companies actually start to specialize and say, look, our core competency, our expertise is really in the scaffolding, or is really in the cell adaptation and modification. And so now we're starting to get a large enough ecosystem where you can get some potential for cross-licensing and collaborations and building off of what other companies are doing.
So I think what I'd like you to notice from what Liz did there is she, GFI's always had good, clear slides. I'm not blowing smoke because we're in a GFI meeting. She has great visuals, which is really important. And all her slides just have this great clean status. So that's one key thing she had going for it. Notice when she had a little gap, she let the gap happen. They weren't very long, but she let gaps happen, and she didn't and fill them, which is really key. And could you get a sense that she was really speaking about something she knows and delivering it in a way that she's saying, here's what's exciting and here's why I'm excited about it. You could tell it had a genuine nature to it. That's that lesson we had earlier about don't lie. You never get the impression Liz is lying, that she's talking about something because she has to, or she's talking about something because the GFI folks said, hey, Liz, we need you to go give this talk. Never mind whether you're really into it. We need you to deliver this talk. We know you can. You have the background for it. It always sounds genuine. And that's important as well. And you just get this sense of natural discussion from her. You could imagine this is the same way she'd talk to you sitting over lunch, my lunchtime test, with just a little bit of a difference in that she's using her voice a little more, I wouldn't say formally, but a little more intentionally in the speaking moment. Whereas you might not speak that way over a lunch table. But this is not theatrical, what she's doing, but she's definitely projecting. She's letting her genuine interest and energy in the topic come through, and her own thought process. So it's very natural. I wanted you to see this, to see that great speaking is natural. It's not brassy or theatrical. It's not, wow, that's incredible. That's like watching a Broadway show. No, it's very relatable. It's very close to the lunch table. And let me give you one other talk here. A few minutes from let's see, a professor at Stanford. This is Professor Bertozzi at Stanford. Let me get this shared. Yeah, I think we're good. There we go. And Professor Carolyn Bertozzi she's a great speaker. And you're going to hear some different things I want to call to your attention. So let's watch a little bit of her talk, which is talking about the sugars on the outside of cells when you're dealing with cancer.
I start by telling you that cancer cells are literally coated in sugar. In fact, all of our cells are coated in sugars. And I remember when I first learned this, it was back when I was an undergraduate and I took a biology class, and it was a long time ago, and no one really knew why. In fact, I remember taking notes in my biology class about the sugar coating on our cells, and our professor used the analogy of the peanut M&M, literally. And I wrote this down. Cells are like peanut M&Ms. Pretty proud of myself that day. Because just like the peanut M&M, there's a sugar coating. And if you bit right through the middle, you would see all kinds of other stuff, proteins and fats and, interesting stuff that cells need. But what was the purpose of that sugar coating? And somebody asked the professor that question, and he said, well, we don't really know, but we think it's similar to the M&M in that it maybe protects the cell so that it doesn't, remember, melt in your mouth, but not in your hand, right? Class of '94, you're old enough to remember that commercial on TV.
Okay, so here, what you can obviously tell from Professor Bertozzi is great mastery of verbal delivery without being fake or artificial. This is how you know she would speak to you, just amped up a little bit for the presenter moment and the presenter venue, but not radically different than who she is. And you also feel great pacing here. Pauses, very clear pauses, right? That create a sense of gravitas and allow you to digest what she said and really let it echo for a moment. And also good amplitude management. She goes up and she goes down. She goes a little bit faster and a little bit slower in the things she says. And notice it's very subtle. But she's a very engaging speaker because she's not theatrical, but she's her best version of herself. That's the title of this whole section, right? Taking who she naturally is and her natural style and just tuning it up a little bit for the big moments on stage. I didn't let this play longer to look at her visuals, so because we're not really talking about that today. We're talking here about the performance style. You also saw how she used her hands. It was relevant to what she was saying and not habitual. And notice how she prowled the stage in a natural way. She didn't have a sing-song walking rhythm back and forth and back. And if you watch this, that was a short clip, but if you watch the whole 11 minutes, you'd say, okay, that's a natural way. She moves when she wants to move, and she uses her hands when she wants to use her hands. And I promise you it doesn't take that much practice. I'll be happy to share out these two links, by the way, through the GFI team if you want to watch the whole thing. They're both great to watch, different styles, but they're both very good speakers who I just think do it really well, and each in their own way, but mostly hewing to our mantra here about how we do things. Let me get into the last couple slides now, and then we'll get into the remainder of Q&A. And these last few slides are going to be dealing with the technologies of doing webcasts, whether it's Zoom or what have you. Let me try and manage some of my many windows here. Okay, there we go. Now I think you're seeing my appropriate slide. Yes, let me get into presenter mode first. This is what happens when you have only 2 monitors and wish you had 3. That's the lament of the 21st century, right? So we had a question last time while I get this set up about what kind of camera are you using? I was asked that, and I said, this is one good thing you can do is take an old, maybe no longer used DSLR that you have laying around the house. Let me get this set up and say, you know what? I can use this as a webcam, which you can do. But I thought about it and I said, that's really not easy. Hooking up a webcam, a DSLR is a webcam, and you have to get an adapter, and you've got to get a tripod, and by the time you do that, you've got kind of a lot of clunky gear. And I thought, no, let's rethink all that and come up with a better formula for how to really recommend a great Zoom setup. So here we go with that, and here we are. So the idea here, whether you're on Zoom or Teams or WebEx or whatever it is, you got these concerns. First of all, get your eyes at eye level with the camera. Don't be looking up. Don't be looking down. As you can see, I'm looking right at the lens. Well, when you saw me on camera, we'll go back to that in a minute. Look right at the lens and spend most of your time looking at the lens. We talked about this last episode too. Should you look at the camera, and how do you do that? Look at the camera significantly. You don't need to stare at it all the time. You're free to glance at your notes, of course. You're free to glance at the Zoom room and see who's there and what questions are coming up. But don't not make eye contact. Try to make that, half of the time you're looking at the camera. If you can do more, great. But if you need to look away from time to time, that's fine. That's natural. Well, people know what's going on. We know you're on Zoom and you got a computer in front of you. But don't avoid eye contact. Make sure you make that a key part, the anchor, if you will, the home or default position of your Zoom presence. It's very important to establish that eye contact. We talked about outdoor versus indoor a minute ago, and I mentioned light. Outdoor, of course, you have lots of light. Indoor, you often have not enough. One of the main things you'll see when professional people do video is they sweat the light way before they get into the camera settings and all that. Lighting is the hardest thing about good video, not the actual camera and lens. Lighting is everything. So you should take a page from that and make sure that you have plenty of light on your face and that you're not a silhouette. This should be obvious, but I can't tell how many people I still see in 2025 are basically a silhouette in their Zoom. You're just killing your look. You're killing your connection when you do that. It looks so careless, to be honest, and it looks like you haven't bothered to brush your hair, if you will. You haven't bothered to care what your audience sees. It's a nasty signal to send, and sometimes people just don't realize it, but you should as a host. So make sure you've got plenty of light, and the light could be anything, and we'll talk about a recommendation. It could be a table lamp, anything. Just get light on your face. As much or more than behind you. I'm a big fan of sound, as you can tell. We want to make sure we have a great microphone first and foremost. It's my number one thing is sound. I really believe this is going to hold an audience if you have to choose one. I would rather you have good light, good camera, and good sound, but if you have to choose one, start with sound. Nothing will hold folks better, and here's what you should never do. Use wireless earbuds. They're a disaster. We'll talk about that in a moment. But wireless earbuds are great for listening or for casual conversations or calls. They have no place in a Zoom or Teams or what have you meeting because they have too many sacrifices. And finally, composition. Don't be too far back from your camera, and most people aren't too close to it. I rarely see that. But I see a lot of people that are too far back or too low. Get your composition like a passport photo. We've all seen our passport photos. We all hate them. Our driver's license photos, we hate those even more, but the composition is good. Regardless of what you think of your driver's license photo, DMV knows how to take a photo. And that composition is spot on. Top of your shoulders, your head, and a little space around the sides, a tiny bit of space at the top of your head, and fill the frame. This is important not just for some trivial reason, but again, it helps you command the Zoom room and to be more present and more noticeable than maybe other people in the room. It gives you that head up, that head and shoulders above. If you're in a competitive meeting where you're up against someone who doesn't believe in your cause, it's best if you look and sound your best because you'll use that to your advantage to help own the room versus them. Here's my setup from last time. This is the one I do not want you to replicate. See, I've got lights, cameras, a microphone boom, the camera's on a tripod. Look at all this crap. No one should be expected to do this, even though you'll see lots and lots of ads all over the internet saying, hey, for the ultimate Zoom meeting, buy this piece of gear with 100 buttons on it. And this stuff's everywhere, and people buy it, and then they never use it. You don't need this. I don't want you to do this. Here's a simple shopping list, and I'm not connected to these products. I don't get a, what do they call it? I don't get an affiliate revenue. I'm not even going to give you links, but I would use this. The Sennheiser 635 is my favorite lightweight, almost invisible headset. It's the one I'm wearing today. That's why I'm doing today's meeting from my office using the same gear that I would recommend you use. $45, not expensive. It will triple your audio quality versus any other microphone you use that's in your laptop or earbuds. Those are just drastically worse than using this headset. Second thing is there's really only one webcam that I think stands head and shoulders above the rest, and I'll come back to it in a minute and I'll show you why. It's this one called the Razer Kiro Pro Ultra. It's a mouthful, but and it's not cheap. It's $300. However, I think it is the only camera of its type. It's basically a DSLR, a digital, a really good digital camera in a tiny package. So it gives you that very excellent rendition of your face and that nice soft background naturally without turning on that soft background feature on Zoom that doesn't look good. It's not bad, but it doesn't look good. And the third thing is I like the ring light from Elgato. This is more expensive than your average ring light. You can get $10 cheapos on Amazon. They're okay. But this one's going to render color better, so your complexion and your skin tone looks accurate, which I think is important. And it's also going to have no flicker. LEDs flicker for a living. That's how they work. But sometimes it's perceptible and sometimes it's not. A good light makes the good camera look even better because it doesn't inject flicker or wonky kind of biased color. So put these three together, $500 with tax. If you do a lot of Zoom meetings that matter, not just calls, but presentations, this is the kit that I use personally. And I think it's a good return on investment. I think it's an excellent return on investment. So coming back to my camera, what you see here is I've got a naturally out of focus background, but it's not that Zoom thing. You know, Zoom gives you that really hyper defocused background. And with Zoom, the edges are bad. Around your head and hair, you get this weird edging that keeps changing all the time. It's distracting. It doesn't look good. You don't want to have that distracting your audience. So get a good quality blur in the background with a camera that does it optically. And you also see, I just played around with my lights in here. I have basically desk lights and lights on my ceiling like anybody does, and the one ring light. But I leave my ceiling lights on because what I noticed is they turn into what we call a hair light. See, I've got that hair, that light on top of my hair there. Not a ton of hair to put light on, but what's left has a nice illumination to it. Play with the lights in your room, and if one of them creates a natural hair light without causing any weird glare or without putting you in silhouette, then go ahead and leave it on. These are all just little things to try, and then you know that's my setup. When I do a really important Zoom, I put everything on like this, and it's easy. Turn on this switch, turn off that switch, turn on my ring light, let's go. So those are kind of some of the, just the nuts and bolts of how we can really get a great look and a great sound in our performance. Let's take more questions now, because I know there might be some questions on the technology as well as on the speaking.
Thanks, Brian. We got one here that is interesting. During a Zoom call, this person likes standing. They feel more energetic. What's your take on standing?
Love it. If that works, that's a classic BU, because the idea of standing will dissipate energy. It will also, in many cases, make a person feel more relaxed over time. Some people feel like if they stand too long, they get uncomfortable. That's one body type. Other people will say, if I sit too long, I get uncomfortable. My butt gets numb, and I feel like all the blood's pooling in my legs. Whatever works for you. Our own physiology, we have to respect and make ourselves comfortable. I know a lot of people who will alternate. Not within a call, that looks a little weird, but they'll have one of those power desks and they'll go up and down and change it for each meeting. So they'll, because these are Zoom jockeys, and they'll be on sitting Zoom one time, standing Zoom on another. So whatever works, I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, I will say I've done an interview where someone was walking on a treadmill, and the vocals kept changing as they were, moving on the treadmill. So
that is so 2021, right? When everybody was trying to see how many places can I Zoom from? I can Zoom from the car. I can Zoom from the gym. I can Zoom while I'm taking the kids to school. We were trying to Zoom everywhere because it was so novel. Now I think we've learned, no, let's find out where Zoom works, and when it's important, let's Zoom from there.
Next one here, we have talked about the pauses. If you have a habit of using or or right or so during those pauses, how do you get rid of those?
Watch your videos. Watch your videos. You will stop yourself so fast, because you will hate nothing about yourself more than your It's one of the things that people see and they cringe immediately. That's probably the number one thing that people will tell me, aside from their hair. Is that what my hair looked like? But then the number two thing I get is, oh, listen to me going, I hate that. So make yourself hurt. Watch your videos and see yourself doing it, and I think it'll just self-correct. It's one of those things that just becomes part of your fiber, and you go, oh, I hate when I do that. And you'll just stop. That's the easiest way to get there.
Awesome. On that note, do you think friends and family are reliable people to rehearse in front of and get feedback from? Or is it just film it and watch it yourself?
Yeah, generally they're going to be unreliable in terms of their opinion, but they are warm bodies to get you to feel like I'm speaking to people who are watching me. So they're good for that, but I don't think their feedback's necessarily ideal because they're going to be nice, or they don't really know what to look for. Although, as I've been saying, the audience is always an expert because that's the point of your talk. Whatever motivates your audience is true, is correct. So I don't want to denigrate the average family member's opinion, but they're going to be too nice because they're family members. Any other audience is going to be a perfect true barometer because that's the whole point. But yeah, family is going to be best used as ballast. Get in front of them, say, I want to do a talk. Just let me rehearse in front of you, or coworkers, or people who work for you. They're never going to critique you, but use them as ballast and know that you have that performance anxiety because you're in front of a team and they're all staring at you saying, okay, what are you going to do? And they're good for that. But I wouldn't get too put too much stock in their opinions because they may be skewed for a variety of political and familial reasons.
Awesome. Next one, are there any risks to trying to be funny?
Well, this is I was watching that movie about Don Rickles that came out a few years ago that John Landis did, and I think in there either he or one of the comics who was commenting on him saying, "Look, it's always good to tell a line or tell a joke or crack wise about something if you're funny. If you're not funny, don't be funny." So I guess that's kind of self-answering. None of us are children, so we all know at this point, are we considered funny or do people laugh politely? I think most of us are self-aware enough to be honest about that. And if you have a certain style of humor, whether it's a quick throwaway and you don't even wait for laughter, or whether it's literally, I want to tell a joke, or whether it's a line you make and you kind of wait for the laughter. Those are all three modes, and there are probably others. Just only use them if they work. You'll know right away if they work. We all know that awkward feeling when a piece of humor doesn't work. Do not force it. That's like one of those, I think we talked earlier about how, all TED Talks, 90% of TED Talks open one of two ways. Either when I was 5 years old or imagine a world, ... Opening with a joke is probably another one of those motifs that I would say is one of the classic cliches. And I don't love it if it's forced. Let the humor happen along the way. And by the way, that can best happen, as we talked about in performance today, sort of naturally, when it occurs to you in the moment. That's my favorite kind of humor in a talk, is when you come up with a witty or humorous aside while you're talking, as opposed to pre-scripting it. I'm a little wary of those. But if it works, it works. There are too many varieties of people out there for me to have a hard and fast rule.
Got it. Next one here. How about colors to wear? I've heard blue transmits confidence. Any recommendations around colors?
I don't know about the psychology of colors. I do know about the mechanics, and I've worked with a lot of really good cinematographers over many years at CNET in particular and at CBS. And I can tell you, yeah, they love blue. So, I'm wearing my camera shirt today. This is my go-to camera shirt. When it really matters, I put on this blue. I don't know what this blue is called, but you can all see it. It's that kind of blue. It's just a killer color for anyone to wear. I've never seen a skin tone that doesn't look good in blue. I don't know what it communicates. It just is a good color against all human skin shades. Don't wear white because it's very hard for most cameras, even today, to balance the color and the brightness in the room with a nuclear white shirt. It's just tough. And same thing for black shirts. It's just so hard for a camera to reconcile all of that. And so the white shirt may end up making your face darker because the camera says, wow, I got to dial down the brightness. That shirt's exploding. And now your face is dark. Or you wear a black shirt and the camera says, I got to bring that black up a little bit so it looks like something. And now your face is overly bright. Those are the problems. Don't wear, this is still a decent rule, don't wear really busy patterns that are geometric. You can wear wild things like paisley, that's fine if you want to wear that. But be careful of grids of dots, squares, checks. Even with today's modern cameras that are really good, even inexpensive ones, they will sometimes pick that up in sizzle or moire. And that's a distraction you just don't need. There's no point in that. I don't think any fashion shirt or blouse or top or jacket is going to advance your look enough to overcome the degree that moire is going to reduce the visual quality of your talk. So keep it pretty plain, but choose the color you like, just not black or white.
Awesome. So we may have talked about this a little bit on the prior ones, and you just addressed it now about kind of the cliche openings. But any tips for connecting with the audience right off the bat?
I would go back to our first chapter on that. I know not everyone was there for that, so let me recap it. And that is open with your best stuff. Don't bury the headline. When I send out the Carolyn Bertozzi video that we saw a little bit of, an excellent talk from a great, great speaker in the sciences. However, if I had to nitpick, you will notice that if you remember these numbers, at 3:06 and at 7:30 in the timeline is where you'll find her thesis. It shouldn't be buried at 3:06 and 7:30. It should be right up at the top at around 10 or 15 seconds. I don't like buried heads. Maybe that's my own personal preference, but I think you need to open with your best stuff so that your audience has this prejudice that your talk is going to be great because it started great. This colors your whole talk, the way you open. That's why I'm nervous about a joke. I'm nervous about a cliche like when I was 5 years old, unless it's really germane to your story, then it's fine. I would get in there and say, hi, I'm here today to tell you about this has been a problem from day one. And all of a sudden, in the last 24 months, we have made advances in this field, and particularly at my lab, that are going to give us more progress than we've had in the last 24 years. And we call it X. Let me tell you about it. That's opening up with a lot of great stuff. You tell me where we're going. You tell me why this matters. You've given me the what and the so what. And you've just had, and you probably didn't use any visuals. You didn't need them. That was all words. And that just gets to it and doesn't give me a flabby start. You know, in a world of podcasts, flabby is the new normal. Pat, you and I agree on this. So many podcasts just start off with a 5-minute or 10-minute wind-up before they get to the subject. And it's a bad habit. It's just bad lack of discipline. But if you cut the other way with a meaty, tight, compelling what and so what open, you're going to hold audiences. They're going to say, wow, who is this? And they're going to, even if your talk gets a little bit flabby later, they're going to think it's not so flabby because they're biased toward the beginning of your talk. And you were initially positioned to them as a compelling speaker. And now they really are going to think you are the whole time, even if you get astray. So do yourself that favor. Open strong, open hard, open tight, and with your best stuff right at the top.
Awesome. I think that is a good place to end, Brian, because we're at the top of the hour here. I just want to thank you so much for the past few weeks. This has been amazing. Again, I know I'll be going back and watching, and hopefully everyone attending will be as well. Real quick to wrap up here, as a reminder, these are recorded. You can find them on our YouTube channel. You'll also get a follow-up email with the link. Thank you for everyone that has joined and asked questions the past 3 weeks. And finally, we encourage you to reach out to GFI. If you have any ideas, feedback, or would like to connect with us, you can email us directly at corporate@gfi.org. Brian, thank you again, and thank you everyone for attending.
Thanks, Pat, and appreciate everyone at the GFI team. Great job on all your shows and presentations, and I've really been delighted to have this great audience. Excellent questions, and I can tell people are getting a lot out of it. So thank you.